Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be making an artist trading card booklet, and this is being made for part of a swap that I'm doing at the moment. So I'm starting off the swap is using playing cards to do your artist trading cards. So to start off, what I'm doing is sanding both sides just to make sure that they've got a little bit of tooth to them, because most playing cards have got some plasticky covering over the top. So the challenge is to use vintage papers, some vintage photos, and to use an allergist colour palette. And the colour palette is using Dina Wakley colours of blackberry, lapis, ocean and sky. So analogous is colours that sit next to each other on the colour wheel. So they blend with each other fairly well. Now, I have to admit, I'm the person who came up with the combination of things to go on this card, and I'm kicking myself because it's a stupid combination of bright colours and vintage. I should have maybe thought about that a bit more, but I quite liked it. I love the image. You can see where I've cut out one of the pictures out of an old postcard, and I've got the other postcard sitting underneath. I really like that, but I couldn't work out how to do that on such a small scale. I struggle working small. I'm used to working at least A4, so working on these playing cards has been a real struggle for me, but it's good to push yourself outside your normal limits, and that's where we learn and grow from. So I am sticking with it, but it's something new. So I'm playing around with making my front cover. Now I wish I had left it just like this and put the colour on the inside, but no, I didn't do that in the end, and I may go back and redo these covers because I think I need to. So what I'm using is some white marshmallow basil, and I've just folded it up into an accordion fold with 4 pieces in it, and I've spread the inside with matte medium, and now I'm just collaging a whole heap of vintage texts on top. So I'm not worrying about what direction they're going or if they're readable or not. I know I'm going to colour over them and collage over the top of them. This is just to give some texture in the background. The gel medium I'm using is matte, so it's not going to dry with a gloss finish, so that's going to make it a lot easier to add paint over the top and so on. Once I've finished collaging it, I go over all of it again with the gel medium just to make sure that everything's glued down really well. I find going over the top with your finger, you can sort of feel where anything's lifting up and push it back down again. And then I'm just trimming off the excess. So once I've done this, then I refold it again, just because I've added obviously extra paper onto here. I want to make sure that it can fold. I'm putting out the tiniest amount of each of the paints, and I'm going to water them down so they're almost like watercolour. And again, I've spritzed my piece of paper with some water as well, so the paints spread really easily. As I was doing this, I was really liking how it was sort of toning out. You can still see the text and you can still see all the bits and pieces in the background, but it just gives you that pop of colour over the top. So I'm just waiting for it to dry somewhat before I go on to the next section, and at the moment I'm trying to find a stencil, and I found this darkroom door cracked pavement, I think it was. So I just removed a lot of the paint, but I've still got those bits and pieces in the background. So again, I'm going onto the back, using up the excess paint and spreading it out and doing the same technique. So you sort of get that muted watercolour effect with the brighter patches of colour. Okay, so as I'm going along, I'm sort of wiping up as I go, which is very unusual for me, but there you go. Refolding it again just to make sure that everything works. And now I'm going in with sort of a doily pattern and just using the bare minimum of ink, black ink on my piece of paper. on my sponge to put that down. So now I was thinking about what I was going to collage on the inside, and you can see I'm playing around with those bits and pieces. Now this is my first fail. This piece has got a lot of fails in it. I was able to recover most of them, but there's some interesting pieces. So my first idea was I wanted to have that group of school kids, and I wanted to have their school or the place that they were going. So I was going to try an image transfer. And I should have tried this out on another piece of paper first. I've done image transfers very successfully using magazine images and using toner images. I wanted to try using a vintage photograph. So I'm gluing it down using the matte medium, using quite a lot of matte medium to glue it down, and waiting for it to dry, which I'm not very patient with. So as I was doing that, I went to work on the front cover again, and this is where I wasn't very happy with what I did. So I thought I really liked what I'd done in the background of the main piece of the body, and I thought it would look good on the front covers, and it just didn't quite work. I don't know why. The colors looked a little bit off. I've got a feeling it may be because I put some of the distress ink to age the paper to beforehand, so it already had some water activated inks in the background, so it changed the colors of the inks or the paints that I was putting on top. The other thing that I didn't particularly like was I got some of the paint onto that piece of vintage postcard, which just didn't help with the edges, that crisp edge that it used to have. I'm going back to my transfer and drying it off, and then going back to this front page. I thought, oh, maybe if I have a flower going across the front. So I stamp it out, and I don't mind it, but again, once I put those images back down the front, it just sort of takes away from that beautiful text in the background and draws your attention to the flower, which doesn't quite work with the rest of what I was doing. So yeah, lots of odd things I'm doing. So as I'm rubbing away the image, I can start to see that it's just not working. Instead of the paper is coming away, but the underneath is coming away in chunks. So very luckily, because it didn't actually adhere properly, I was able to remove it without damaging the paper underneath, which was a huge relief. If I tried to do that with a proper magazine transfer, it wouldn't have worked. So that was a saving grace. With the piece of postcard that I peeled off to make that image transfer slightly thinner though, I had this beautiful text left, so I decided to add that on as a bit of a border along the outsides. And once I put that on, it started to come together, and I really liked it. What you're seeing here is I'm trying to make the postcards are actually quite thick, so I'm trying to halve them. Now with this one, it didn't work. With the other postcard that I worked, I was able to peel off the backing really easily. But this one was made up of slightly different paper. These postcards and pictures that I have are from the late 1800s, early 1900s. So when I was in Munich, I came across a shop that was selling a box for 50 euros just full of postcards and pictures, and I've got thousands of them. They're amazing. So they're things that I dip into quite regularly. Now I'm just going, because I really like that text on the back, I decided to, on my back cover, that I was going to put some. And I really liked that, and it certainly helped me with my back cover. So I wanted to do something with the front cover using that text, but it didn't quite work. So you can see I get frustrated and put it away and then come back and go back again. So this is part of the box of goodies that I have, and there's just so many of them in here. Lots of postcard packs of different areas, pictures of children, pictures of people on picnics, just almost anything you can think of. This one was a book of scenery. So I wasn't sure if I still wanted to go with putting some like building in the background or putting another figure. In the end, I decided just to put the picture of the school children down. And again, I'm gluing this all down using matte medium and just trimming off the excess. And I really like just the simplicity of that. It worked well. So instead of adding anything more, I decided to add some of the quotes from the Tim Holtz clippings. So thinking about it, but I love these clippings, but it takes a while to actually go through because you need to read all of them to see the bits and pieces that go together. So I ended up calling it The Brothers. And I've got do all the good you can, knowledge which costs nothing, learning to fly if there are let fly away. So it kind of works together. The lovely thing about this clippings set of stickers are they've just been clipped out of vintage books. So they're not, they've got funny edges on them. The colours of them are the colours of the papers from the vintage books, so you don't really need to age them. They sort of fit in with what you're doing, which I quite like. On the front cover, I decided to call it Lesson 175 just because. And I used the cutout of the men that I had to create a quick mask so I could put a little bit of shadowing behind them just to make them pop out from the page somewhat. I finally decided I was going to put on a little bit of the vintage paper that I had and stick it down the men on the front cover and then put the piece on. So I was starting to get happier with what I'd done. I'm just going around the edge with some gold ink. Now this ink is the new Jenny Davenport squid ink and it is very, very yellow gold, which I wasn't really happy with. So I go back in with some black ink as well just to dull down the colour somewhat. I was thinking about putting funky hats on the two men and putting a window on, and I thought, no, you're just adding too much. You're just getting a little bit carried away here. So I went through my stash of haberdashery stuff and I found this beaded trim and some brown satin ribbon. So I decided that I was going to use these on my piece in assembling them all together. And I was just using up extra paint there on that music piece paper, so that's something I've got ready for next time. So I've got my stamp, which I'm stamping out, putting on some of the black squid ink, which is a hybrid ink, so it's a kind of permanent ink, and I'm just pressing my ribbon onto it so I've got some writing on my ribbon. And the writing says, what's the story? What happened in the story next? It's a Seth Apter stamp from I.O. and Impression Obsessions. So I'm popping the ribbon in to make my book to tie it together. Again, this is something I didn't really think about because it's an accordion book, so if I tie it together at the front, the back's going to pop open. That's one thing I need to go back and revisit. I'm just around the edges of my playing cards, just to hide the edge, putting some black ink. And just with some double-sided tape along the bottom, that's enough to hold the beaded trim in place. So peeling off and just sticking down the beaded trim, trimming it off and sticking it all down into place. With the beaded trim, you just need to be a little bit careful about where you cut so you don't cut one of the beaded bits so it falls off. I've learnt from experience with that one. Now I'm just sticking in my little accordion book. So I'm really, really happy with the insides and how it all worked. Here is where I work out that if I tie it together, it's going to stay open. As I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, oh, I need to add some border. And this is where I wish I hadn't done this, because this just was too thick and too dark on the front cover. I think if I'd left it, I would have been happier with it. I'm just going in again with the black marker around the edges, just to sort of get a sort of a organic border. So this is the finished Artist Trading Card accordion book. So overall I'm happy with it, but there were a few fail moments in it, but I'm glad I sort of worked out how to fix them and how to come across. I'm really pleased that I was able to fix where the transfer was going to be. I love the inside of this book, and I really actually do like the colours in the background combined with the vintage papers and photographs. Working in a small scale is something I still need to work on, but hopefully by the end of doing this swap I will have that under my belt. So I hope you enjoyed this little mini book, and please share with me if you've got any skills or tricks in working in the small scale. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.